Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Eswar Prasad with his magisterial book, The Doom Loop of Cornell on Trade. Professor, what is a single thing you would say to a freshman class at Cornell this morning about this court decision?
It is a very important assertion of the court's authority in terms of making sure that the separation of powers between the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, stays in place. There has been a lot of concern about the rule of law and what is being done to that, but it's very good that the Supreme Court really put its foot down and made it clear that at least the specific authority that President Trump has been using to invoke tariffs against a broad range of trading partners, that's not quite on.
You do this, you get on planes and you go advise the French, the Germans, you advise Singapore. What is your advice to the continent of Europe as they respond to this trade bombshell?
Patience. I think the key issue right now is how this is going to play out. The Trump administration has made it abundantly clear that it's going to use other tools that it has in its arsenal in order to reimpose tariffs at one level or the other. But the question of how effectively they can do it, how broadly they can do it, and how quickly they can do it, I think is really on the table right now. Many countries, including economic areas like the European Union, have in fact been engaged in negotiations, have set up trade deals with the U.S. already, and some of them have gotten better deals because of this court ruling. Some of them have gotten worse deals. But I think the reality is that nobody quite knows right now what the trade landscape is going to look like, what sort of tariff measures are going to be in place. So I think right now, waiting is probably the best thing to see how the dust settles.
So, Eswar, is this, if I'm some of the other countries, trading partners in the U.S., I mean, if I've already struck deals, what do I do here? Do I come back to the U.S. and say, hey, we need to renegotiate? I'm not paying 30% here. I want the 10 or the 15%. What happens here?
That's right. Many of these countries have made economic concessions, and it has cost them some political capital within their own, countries. So I think countries do want to stick with the trade deals if this court ruling leaves them in a better position. But there are many countries who struck trade deals, made these concessions, and now find themselves in a worse position because Trump has imposed these tariffs across the board using Section 122. And that is certainly going to mean that renegotiation is needed. But the reality is that the U.S. administration has limited capacity to deal with all of this at the same time. But certainly, if a country has struck a trade deal and now is in a worse position than before that deal, they need to make a pitch for renegotiation, or at least for the Trump administration, to adhere to the terms of the deal and give them exemptions from this broad 15% tariff that Trump has now applied across the board. For countries that are in the midst of negotiations, certainly it gives them a stronger bargaining hand because the Trump administration clearly cannot apply tariffs willy-nilly across the board. So I think those negotiations are probably going to take a bit of a pause.
Eswar, one could argue that if nothing else, this Supreme Court ruling just reintroduces, a level of uncertainty into trade, global trade, like we had back almost in April of last year. How do you think global trading partners will proceed over the coming months, given this Supreme Court ruling?
The level of uncertainty, as you've pointed out, Paul, is just enormously elevated right now because, yes, Trump's actions with tariffs were quite, peremptory, mercurial, and you never quite knew what was going to happen in terms of the levels of tariffs, who would be subjected to them. But there was a sense that at least some certainty was returning to the process with some tariffs being taken off, some trade deals being struck. All of that is off the table right now. The more interesting question is how businesses are going to respond, because to them, now the landscape has become completely uncertain, and the presumption is probably that they're going to retreat from trade and try to protect themselves from further uncertainty at the moment.
Well, that's right where I wanted to go, Eswar, to finish up here. And folks, I can't say enough. I'm going to say it with Eswar on. The doom loop, I'm like a third. He's got Cersei from the Game of Thrones in chapter 1.
Yep.
I mean, I had no idea Eswar Cersei from the Game of Thrones was doing economics. She was at she was at Cornell. She was so difficult at Cornell. She melted snow and ice, just like in
Ithaca,
the show. Eswar, I look at the doom loop here, and for me, it's Apple lawyer up. They had 800 million, then 1.1 billion, maybe 1.4 billion. Some model of 3.2 billion in tariffs. Is Tim Cook going to sue the United States of America to get that money back?
That's going to be a long and very complicated road, because certainly unraveling all the refunds, unraveling all the tariffs that have already been paid and sending out refunds is going to be a massively difficult administrative process. Although some argue that, it's quite easy to just turn the money back, given that the U.S. administration has a very clear indication of who paid tariffs and when. But I think there is going to be, again, some holding off on this, because the numbers involved are really large at the moment. And it's not entirely clear this administration has the capacity to turn things around or wants to, because, again, with new tariffs coming into place and some of these decisions now likely to rest on what tools the administration decides to use, I think all the uncertainty with the tariff landscape means that corporations are not going to be jumping up and down to get the tariffs back, especially the large ones. For the smaller ones that live day to day, it's a much more important issue, because they need that money.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that in any way, shape, or form. Eswar Prasad, thank you so much for joining us. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Surveillance coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app, or watch us live on YouTube.
Too short a visit right now with Torsten Slok with Apollo Global Management. He has spent the weekend and has wonderful continental Europe experience. Torsten, how do you think the continent will respond to tariffs? The zeitgeist over the weekend is Britain hammered, China, Brazil, etc. I mean, how does the EU adjust?
Well, the European Commission put out a statement yesterday where they clearly said that they were going to honor the trade deal, but at the same time, we were, of course, asking questions about, well, what are the exact conditions for what we're doing going forward? So the Europeans have already stated that they are going to honor the trade deal. They expect the US to honor the trade deal. But it's very clear that this is indeed injecting a whole new level of uncertainty, also on the Europeans' part.
With your work at Apollo Global Management, is there a summed market reaction to what this does to confidence, say, out to the 4th of July?
Well, the challenge now is, of course, that Section 122 tariffs, the 15%, they only count for 150 days. And then it remains to be seen whether they will be continued by Congress. So in that sense, that's a whole new level of uncertainty. The other level of uncertainty also is that the 15% is on the whole world and not on individual countries. So this is also raising questions about that it's no longer as targeted as it was before. It cannot even be targeted just to Europe or to, say, Korea or Japan. It is on literally every trade partner that the US has.
Right.
So those two dimensions, both of the time length and also that it's on everyone, is indeed injecting uncertainty. I mean, where, of course, many people might even have looked at this and say, well, Friday it was 10%, now it's 15%. And that's, of course, raising questions on their parts also about what is exactly the level of tariffs, in particular when we get to 150 days down the road.
And Claudia Sampaw was blistering and saying that even these new tariffs could be legally challenged.
Exactly. So, and Torsten, how do you think our trading partners will react here? It's just yet another kind of unknown thrown into the discussions of trade policy. How do you think they're going to react here?
Well, I think that, again, the Europeans' response, and I think also the fact that the Indian mission to the US to do trade negotiations was canceled, is telling you also that they are beginning to be at least some legal issues around both, of course, the existing trade deals, but also what might be the framework going forward. They are likely thinking about, well, if we sign a document today, is this going to change soon again? Are there going to be any legal issues? And as Claudia Sam was saying, that the 122 is actually under the conditions that there has to be a balance of payment crisis, which is very different from a trade crisis or a trade deficit and a balance of payment deficit. So from that perspective, there's also legal challenges likely going to come on the Section 122 tariff. So that's why there's just a lot of things. The dust has really been whirled up. We really opened up the macroeconomic textbook in international finance because there's just a lot of things that now people need to think very hard about. And I think that's what the rest of the world is trying to do at this moment.
Torsten, despite all the global trade uncertainty over the past 14, 15 months, the U.S. economy performing well. How do you put that into context?
Well, because in the background, while we've had the trade war, especially, of course, this Liberation Day, we've had a very strong boom in AI spending. And we've also had an industrial renaissance. The industrial renaissance really was already started under Biden with the CHIPS Act, saying that semiconductors need to be produced domestically. Of course, Trump has also focused on pharmaceuticals need to produce domestically. There's also more focus on defense, of course, need to also grow. And this industrial renaissance, this is indeed also something that's a tailwind to growth. And finally, let's not forget on January the 1st, we also got the One Big Beautiful Bill. The One Big Beautiful Bill was changes to tax laws that were done retroactively. So it actually took effect of 1st of January 2025. That means that when households get a tax refund here in April and March, well, that tax refund, which normally is around $3,000, that will now go up to roughly around $4,000. So we have a fairly significant boost coming to consumer spending here in March, April, and May. And on top of that, we also have immediate expensing where companies can write down their CapEx expenditures right away, which is also a boost to CapEx spending. So the short answer to your question is, yes, the trade war has certainly been a headwind. But while that headwind has been playing out, we've had a number of tailwinds that, of course, have been the reason why the economy has continued to do so well.
I've got a rationalization, Torsten, of a 1.4% GDP was due to shutdown. Did you bring down a real GDP view forward for the rest of this year?
No, because also, exactly as you're saying, Tom, this BEA clearly said that the 1.4 number, if we take what the shutdown accounted for, that was roughly 1 percentage point. So that brings you to 2.4, which is higher than the Congressional Budget Office estimate of 2%, which is the long-run growth rate for the U.S. So in that sense, the U.S. economy, outside of the shutdown, of course, was actually still doing reasonably well. And the slowdown in the labor market, as you also have discussed so much, it really is mainly driven by labor supply that has been falling and so much labor demand. So that's why you can still have strong GDP and slower job growth. But slower job growth is not because of weaker labor demand, but it's really because of weaker labor supply. So taken together, the U.S. economy actually continues to do well. That doesn't mean that there's still risks that we could hit the rough and not go down straight the fairway. We actually think the risk of hitting the rough and not going straight to the hole here, it has increased from 10% to 30%. So we are watching the tail risk to the outlook very carefully, not only, of course, because of AI and what's going on with the trade war, but also because of issues such as government debt. Interest rates could potentially see a quick move up and down because of the inflation surprise. Adam Posen and Orsak saying inflation is going to go higher. So there's a number of other things that could throw us off. But the bottom line is the economy continues to do well.
Orsak and Posen looking at wage inflation as maybe the surprise of the year. Torsten Slok, thank you so much with Apollo. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Surveillance coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Or watch us live on YouTube.
It's one of the most twisted parchments in economics out of Brown University, with all of the fabulous heritage there of William Poole and other giants as well. They're not to the crazy mathiness, Paul, of San Diego, which is like the most mathematical. I mean, they're doing standard deviations in the hallways.
Yes,
it's that.
Exactly.
It's nuts. Martha Gimbel survived it all, and has provided leadership at the budget lab at Yale. And as we go from stumbling crisis to stumbling crisis, everybody is tuning in with more and more intensity to the academic work. This weekend, they published a tour de force. I put one chart figure 5 out. I'm going to translate it now with political viciousness for Martha Gimbel. Martha, your distribution of tariff effect and then adjusted for the fact will substitute. And you take it after tax. When you take the tariff analysis of the budget lab after tax, after some form of rental housing measurement, after some form of basic food measurement, how is the bottom half going to survive these tariffs?
It's not going to be great for anyone, but tariffs are also regressive. It's much, much worse for people at the bottom. And I think it's also important to keep in mind that this combines with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act from last year, which, yes, does send money out into the economy, but is also regressive. And if you combine the effects of tariffs and the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, it's only really people at the top who are better off on net. And so if you're thinking about what's going to happen with consumer spending in the future, we're going to be facing consumers towards the middle and bottom who are a lot more constrained because prices are going up for them at the same time that they have less spending power.
So, Martha, what did the Supreme Court ruling mean for the overall tariff rate? Is it higher? Is it lower? Is it the same? I don't know.
Well, yes, that is an excellent question. That's partly because the tariff rate has been a lot of different things over the weekend. So we started at 16% going into this SCOTUS ruling. Then SCOTUS ruled it went down to 9%. Then President Trump announced tariffs, but they didn't announce the exemption. So it looked like it went up to 15%. Then they announced the exemptions, it went down to 12%. And then he announced that we were going to 15% and went back up to 14%. So we've had like 5 different tariff rates in the space of 36 hours. I should also note when I say, 12, 14, he's using an authority that expires in 150 days. Now, they've said that they're going to put other tariffs in place that will, in some ways replicate these tariffs. That might be true at the, overall effective tariff rate, that headline number. But if you're a business, you need to know, exactly what products are going to be tariffed, exactly what countries are going to be affected. And they haven't provided clarity on that. And so what we're in is this big sea of uncertainty that we're all going to be sitting in for quite some time.
So, boy, it's so hard just to keep track of what the tariff rates are. Do we have any confidence that they're being collected accurately? Because I can't imagine some person at some loading dock or, figuring all this stuff out here.
I will say at one point in 2025, a reporter called me and said, do you know what the tariff rate is on this very specific product? And I said, I have no idea. That's a question for CBP. And he said, they were my first call. They said they couldn't tell me. It's very confusing. And you're trying to keep track of all these different things and when things land, what was the tariff rate when they landed. It's really hard to do business under these circumstances.
Give us a window, Martha, into this. How many experts at the budget lab of Yale were working on this magic Friday and into the weekend? How many people were making the soup?
Yeah, we had 4. So I will call them in here. John Rico, John Island, Josh Kendall, and Maddie Lee. So everyone please check your local tariff.
So Island's got substantial Berkeley, Maryland chops. He's worked at CBO and that. Did the adults in the room, these young Turks who are brilliant, do they see the same legal sequence ballet again of a court, an appeals court, a Supreme Court? Or for all our listeners and viewers, Martha Gimbel, can we get this done faster?
I don't know. So the Section 122, which is the authority that they're using right now, you've already seen people over the weekend debating whether or not it applies to this particular situation. And, once again, are these tariffs legal? So I assume that there's going to be litigation, and we're just going to go through the whole thing all over again.
Martha Gimbel with us, the Budget Lab at Yale, and we continue here. Douglas Irwin of Dartmouth College, definitive, his book Against the Tides, changed the landscape of tariff analysis 30, 40 years ago, with us tomorrow as well. Paul Sweeney with Martha Gimbel.
Martha, how about some of these trading, quote unquote, partners that have signed, I guess, big reciprocal deals that are at rates perhaps higher than the 10 or 15% wherever we are now? What do they do? Do they come back to the negotiating table and say, hey, we want the better rate? What do they do?
Yeah, that's a really great question. There was just reporting out this morning saying that Europe is putting their, deals on hold until they find out what on earth is going on. There's a lot of uncertainty at this point. You haven't asked me about refunds for people who have already paid tariffs. That's another source of uncertainty. The court didn't really rule on that. The administration has heavily implied that they're going to fight any payment of refunds. So people are going to start suing.
Right.
When you think about tariffs, there are negative economic effects that I think about with tariffs. But for me, overall, the biggest negative comes in through the uncertainty and people being unable to make decisions and not knowing what's going on. And we certainly did not see a decrease in uncertainty over the weekend.
My answer is, as an amateur, this gets decided at the ballot box as it has back to 1890 and frankly before that. That was coming off the Panic of 1872. They had the enjoyment of the Panic of 1893, 3 years later, where basically the nations threw the Republicans out of office. Martha Gimbel, do you and your team see a political ballot box solution to our tariff discussion?
We're a nonpartisan group of economists, so I
want to get you in trouble. Come on.
I will leave that to the political scientists. The one thing I will say is, because of the 150-day limit on the type of legal authority that they're using right now, this is actually going to become, almost by design, a very live issue over the summer, just as we're heading into the midterms. So I think, depending on which way you think this is going to go, it's going to be a subject of discussion then.
Can you calculate the fiscal hole now? Can you figure out, with just the craziness of what, Paul, 72 hours? Mm-hmm. Is there a new plugin that CBO is going to have where the money's not there? What do we do?
Well, first of all, shout out to CBO, who managed to get their updated budget and economic outlook out right before this. So I know the analysts there are breathing a sigh of relief. They did say that they expect that the administration will be able to, under different legal authorities, basically recreate the tariffs, and it won't have a huge impact on revenue. We're still waiting to see, again, what the final mix of tariffs looks like. If you look at the 15% and it's extended after 150 days, that takes you down to $2 trillion over 10. We were previously at $2.3 trillion over 10, so you've lost $300 billion. That's a substantial amount of money, to be clear, but you haven't lost the full shebang. So you're still going to get a substantial amount of revenue from
if
these.
Apple wants a big check, or name any other big company, are the tariff monies in a piggy bank somewhere? Or have they already, dare I say, have they already been spent?
Well, it's sort of an interesting question, actually, of how good has the record keeping been on this? It's not like they've been kept in a, special box in case of, how the Supreme Court ruled. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't give refunds, but they have to track down who paid what, in what way. You need the documentation. It's just going to be a mess.
So what is the bull case for just broad tariffs like we're seeing this administration? You're an economist. There's got to be something there for this administration to hang their hat on.
Almost all economists would say to you that there is not. We've started doing a tariff impacts tracker where every month we look at the impacts of tariffs and, are we seeing that improvement in manufacturing employment that the administration said we would get from tariffs?
Yeah.
No, it has not been the case, right? Things like that. We are seeing some sign of tariffs showing up in durable prices. So, so far what you're seeing is the beginnings of what economists said was going to happen, which is on net, bad for employment, not ideal for GDP, and a rise in prices.
Paul asks the most uncomfortable questions, Martha. It's made more so by the blizzard.
Yeah, exactly.
Martha, you're a trooper. Thank you so much. Folks, my think tank of the year last year, the Budget Lab at Yale. There's a million other people doing spectacular at work, but wow, have they become influential.
Yeah.
Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Surveillance coming up after this.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern.
I made a joke
Listen
earlier
on
to
Apple
Paul
CarPlay
Sweeney.
and Android
How are
Auto
you getting
with the
home
Bloomberg Business app.
on Tuesday?
Or
How
watch
do
us
you get
live
to
on
work? And I got
YouTube.
silence from Paul. You don't really know right now.
No, I don't.
You?
I mean, New Jersey Transit will wait on them, but I suspect I'll be spending another evening in the metropolis.
We will get an update now from a gentleman with experience of this, with legit major storm experience. Janno Lieber joins us now with the MTA. Janno, what's your biggest headache right now?
Listen, we got service running. The challenges are well known. We got to keep our snow fighting equipment. We got jet engine snow blowers operating on the subways, literally on clearing the tracks, especially in the outdoor areas. The challenge of buses moving around is the same as any vehicle, but we are meeting the challenge. Tom, Paul, we're running full subway service, albeit on a little reduced frequencies. We got buses out there. Metro North is operating on a reduced schedule. The one piece of our system that is on suspension is the Long Island Railroad. It's no secret that Long Island's getting hammered, and that wasn't a safe place to operate. But otherwise, subways, buses, commuter rail operating.
How does the wind play into it? I mean, I'm calling it a snow-a-cane. I get the temperature. Snow is snow. But like the wind on the various trunks that you have, I mean, down underground, it doesn't affect it. But how do you adapt to the wind, Janno Lieber?
The issue with wind mostly is actually the impact it has on drifting. When you have, for example, we have some areas of the subway system that are what we call an open cut. That's like a little valley, a depressed area below grade, but it's still open to the sky. And snow tends to accumulate, and the wind pushes the snow into those areas. The drifting on the commuter railroads sometimes will cover the third rail, our source of power. So that is. And obviously for people who are driving buses and even trains, the visibility issues associated with wind. That wind is the dominant factor in determining when we can bring back Long Island Railroad service at the east end of our system.
So what is the latest thinking, Janno, about the Long Island Railroad here? Because, again, as you've mentioned and we've heard from the weather folks, that's really bearing the brunt of this storm.
Yeah, well, we did an orderly shutdown last night at about 1 a.m. The goal is always to get everybody home. We did that last night with some extra service late. And now we're going to be focused on orderly resumption of service, hopefully in time to operate tomorrow when the world will be getting a little bit back to normal. So that's the approach that we take. Safety first. And taking account of where the snow accumulations and the drifting may have impacted on service. One thing to bear in mind is in our big train yards, that's where we tend to get, the biggest drifting issues. And, sometimes that inhibits your ability to put cars into the system, into service. So we'll be digging out from in the yards and making sure that, again, the third rail and the tracks themselves are clear of snow.
We continue with Janno Lieber, MTA chair, quality time from his crisis center. Paul Sweeney with Janno Lieber.
Janno, so all your personnel, the critical personnel of the MTA, how do you manage getting those folks to where they need to be? Because, boy, they have to get there just like the rest of us.
It's part of the deal when you sign up to work for the MTA that you may have to come in under extreme circumstances when the rest of the world is being told to stay home. Our workers are being told to come in, and they do. They worked through the night. They worked heavily yesterday. We got 70,000 employees at the MTA. Thousands of them have been out. Many of them have slept in bus garages or in the rail control center where our head of subways spent the night, at the bus command center. It's part of the deal working for the MTA. And I talked to Governor Hochul in the last hour or two, and and she's really focused on
Right.
tip of the hat to the workforce.
Janno Lieber, I love artificial intelligence. It can ruin your day. Janno, you got to help me here with the $1.8 million per inch myth. Now, this is a Department of Sanitation that every inch of snow costs $1.8 million. What's your every inch of blizzard that costs the MTA? Do you have a number? Even if you don't tell me, do you have a number in your head?
I'll tell you the absolute truth. I have no idea whatsoever. You've given me a new metric. We use analytics here like crazy to evaluate how well we're doing, hopefully to operate more efficiently every day. Cost per car mile, cost per revenue mile for subway and bus and commuter rail. You've given me a new metric to study, but right now I have no idea what to say to you.
Janno, this is the second big winter storm of the season. It's arguably one of the biggest storms we've had in decades in this area. How's your system kind of holding up? Is there a cumulative effect where, boy, we really don't want to have a third or a fourth storm this season?
Honestly, the challenge is the same every time, which is you have to get the snow off. You have to make sure you have enough people to operate fully. You have to chain all the buses. You have to move subway cars around and put them in the tunnel, store them in the tunnels. It's not that we every storm makes it harder. To the contrary, for better or worse, we're getting better at preparing for these because we've had repetitive storms, and we're going to continue to try to get better. In the era of climate change, we're dealing with all kinds of extreme weather events. Right now we're forgetting about torrential rainfall and rising sea levels, but those are issues for the MTA as well.
What does the morning look like? Let's say 4 or 5 a.m. Tuesday morning. Mr. Lieber, can you say back to normal?
I don't know about normal, but listen, our friends at the Department of Sanitation are clearing not just the streets, but the bus stops. That's really important. Yep. Something that I know the mayor wants to do better at compared to the first time around, so that our people who depend on buses will be able to get on and off them without having to climb over a 4-foot mound of snow. That's an important issue.
That's brilliant. Who actually picks up a shovel and shovels a bus stop? Who is that person?
Well, it's a lot. It's folks who work for the Department of Sanitation. They're supplemented. This is City of New York as opposed to MTA, but they're supplemented by Parks Department workers, and they're actually hiring folks off the street for extra shovelers this time around. So I'm very hopeful that particular challenge will be addressed. And we're going to be clearing not just the tracks, but also our yards, as I mentioned, which is where trains tend to get stuck. And there are a lot of complex switches that can inhibit things if they're not properly in order.
One more question, Paul. You were impressed by the buses.
Yeah, just walking to work this morning, I saw some of the buses here. Talk to us about the buses, because boy, I haven't seen too many snowplows out yet because the storm is still raging here. How did the buses adapt here?
It's old-fashioned stuff, Paul. We put chains on the tires of every bus, and that gets done in the days leading up to the storm. When we know it's coming, forecasting's getting better and better. We chain the entire fleet, and we take all the articulated buses, which are tend to move around a little more in slippery conditions. We take them out of service, and we make plans accordingly.
Janno, thank you so much for taking precious time this morning. This is the MTA of New York City as they deal with the storm, as I'm sure we're seeing in Philadelphia and Boston.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live each weekday, 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.